That's weird. I didn't recognize them. That is weird. Next story comes from Lumio. I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's got a nice little cat profile picture. A few years ago, I used to play a lot with my dolls and stuffed animals. I had a lot of toys and I played with them all the time. But something strange happened to me when I was 6 years old. I was playing with my dolls until it got dark. Very late, and my parents told me I should go to sleep, but I didn't want to. So I continued playing until they called me again, and I, angry, get up and tell them I'm coming. But I didn't want to stop playing until I saw that one of my dolls, which I still have in storage, moved to the left a little, and I, scared by what I saw, screamed and ran to my parents' room. I told them what I saw crying, but they didn't believe me. And from that day on, I was traumatized, lol. Now I'm a little afraid of dolls and stuffed animals in general. I don't know what happened to me. I hope it was a game of imagination, and not that my Bella, the princess doll, was possessed. Bella is possessed as fuck. The next story comes from Nina, and they write, when I went to visit my aunt and uncle a few years back, I was staying in their office quite late. It's the kind of building where you have offices on the last floor to play some video games on the computer. It was starting to get quite dark outside, and I saw some lights through the curtains. They were car headlights. A few moments later, two people came out of it. I started to hear an argument going on right outside the office door between a man and a woman. Roughly translated, the woman was saying something like this: "Please, I've told you about this, leave me alone. I'll call the police." The thing is, the woman was really sounding distressed and in need of help. Needless to say, young me was scared shitless about all this. I still think about it sometimes, about if what I heard but did not see was just something my young mind made up or something actually serious going on. I don't know. Hopefully, that was not a serious situation, and if it was, hopefully everything ended up alright. The next story comes from Foxy MSP. I don't know if this is good enough, but my house has been haunted since I can remember. First occurrence would have been as a child, when my mother told me to go to bed, and I did exactly that, but she could still see a little girl who looked like me on the sofa in my position. Oh no. Second thing is the fact that growing up in this bedroom, I've always felt the presence of a lady in the corner of my room near my bookshelf. Not a negative energy, a quite calm one, almost reminds me of a nurse. I never told anybody about my speculations, as it seems weird to say you feel a presence, but I was talking to my mom about it as she slept in this room prior to before it becoming my room, and I told her about this feeling, and she basically confirmed that she and my ghost hunter Nan felt a young lady there as well, which creeped me out as I never stated where I felt, or the gender, or how this presence felt to me. Other occurrences include hearing someone walk in front of my door. It was just me and my brother alone, and our floorboards make noises when you walk in front of my room as it's loose. And I heard the door handle, and then the door closed and suddenly opened, and I froze, paralyzed in bed. Yikes. I asked my brother, and he said he went downstairs, and he heard my floorboards make sounds as well. A few weeks ago, I closed the downstairs door fully, came downstairs, and it opened. I then asked my brother if he opened, and he denied it. So I closed it in front of him, so we both witnessed me doing so, and we both went up, and then when we came, it was open again. Other things include books and objects on desks and shelves throwing themselves off, especially when I'm not at home, but always in my room / my objects. If I came back to my room and there was objects all over the place, I would be pissed. The next story comes from What? When I was about 5, my parents and I were staying in some rundown hotel in Reno that was always in the process of being renovated. Anyways, it was nighttime, and I remember waking up at some odd hour and being able to see better in the room than I probably should have. It was almost like the room was washed in a weird bluish-green filter / light. I got off my cot that I was sleeping on and walked into the room my parents were sleeping in the back Rite Aid of sorts. All the shelves were empty except for this one cash register looking desk made out of worn white painted material, and it was on a little rotating rack that was white, and it was one singular pack of shiny pink and purple butterfly stickers. I remember taking them and leaving. For some reason, I don't remember thinking anything strange about this, question mark. And I woke up my mom, who was sleeping closest to the wall, and saying, "Look, I got stickers," and pointing back to the wall, which was now back to normal. I don't remember what my mom said, but she remembers me waking her up. Even since then, I have never experienced anything similar. No idea what that was, but I don't think I ever used those stickers, and they might still sit in a box out in my garage. If you still have those stickers, you gotta find those. The next story comes from Alien Like Scaling. I never experienced anything paranormal growing up, aside from hearing voices call my name as a toddler, but that could be explained, question mark. But recently, I've had weird situations in my house. It started when my mom found a photo album in one of the cupboards in the house, and I decided to keep it in my room because I could tell it had sentimental value. I think that if there is something paranormal, this is where it stems from. I swear to God, after finding the album, little things started happening. I heard knocking on my window every now and then, which I thought could be birds. Once I heard someone else's breathing in my room besides my own. But I convinced myself that I was paranoid. 2 or 3 times, I swear, I saw a dark figure walk down my hallway from the corner of my eye. Once I lost something small in my room. I can't even clearly remember this one, but it was something like an earring or a lip balm. And when I returned, it was on my nightstand, even though I know it wasn't there before. The weirdest situation happened to me in the living room. My friends were baking in the kitchen, and I had my back turned to my smallest sister. I feel someone's hand touch the back of my head, and I assume it's one of my friends messing with me. So I turn around and nothing. They're not even looking at me, and they're too far to touch me. I asked my mom, and she didn't see anything, but I clearly felt a hand, and it felt warm. After that, I decided there was a chance I was being haunted, but I was never scared or felt a bad vibe, so I left it alone. Sometimes I spoke out loud in my room, asked it not to scare me on purpose, and it surprisingly worked. After a while, I decided to ask if it would please leave me alone, and I haven't experienced anything since. My aunt, mom's side, said that when she lived in this house, she also saw a woman in my bedroom, and my uncle, mom's side, also saw someone walk across our hallway. So maybe there is something. I'd like to think she's nice if she is real. I'll keep her photo album safe if it belongs to her. If I ever had any of those experiences, that's crazy, bro. Next story comes from Michelle. These have actually happened in the house I currently live in. First, I was down in the basement switching over laundry at like 11:30 at night, and I saw this lady standing there in a white dress, extremely similar to a wedding dress. Scared the crap out of me. So me being 13, 14 years old, thought it was some reflection of the light until my stepmom went down the next evening doing the same thing and saw it as well. 2. In our living room, there are marks from where old furniture used to be, since we ripped up the carpet. And once I was watching TV, a normal thing, and where our table is, the couch used to be. The centerpiece shifted slightly to the right. Since the table is very old and wooden, I saw what looked like to be a person sitting on the table based on the way it bowed as any would-be's would. Weird. Okay, and the third story, we were playing cards as a family, and out of the corner of our eyes, me and my dad both saw this shadow thing, and not even 2 seconds later, we both got extreme chills, while the rest of the family didn't see it and had no chills. Interesting. The next story comes from Hannah Tadlock. When I was little, it was St. Patrick's Day, and I made a trap for a leprechaun and used an old Lisa Frank tin, some popsicle sticks, and some little Debbie Glazer donuts as a trap. We were about to leave to go get groceries from Walmart when I checked my trap over last time, and the donut was gone. In its place stood a golden coin. Who setting it up and leaving it out to swap it. Am I Irish? Will my children be ginger? The next story comes from Honeycomb. And they write, one time when I was much younger and moved into my current house, I picked this one room to stay in, and once my bed was in there, I was laying on the floor with my back against it. I got the strongest feeling that someone was about to grab me, and when I turned around there was nothing there. The window in the general area near it just creeps me out really bad, and there's sometimes black figures that stand over me or just chill out. This next story is from my... Ever since I gained consciousness, I've had a shadow figure I see every night. It's a tall, slim man with a long coat and a top hat, and he either had a cane or was in a wheelchair. See the Hat Man? That's crazy. My sister always saw the Hat Man in her room looking out the windows, which is actually right here and then right to the left of me. But I ain't ever seen no Hat Man. That fucking pussy. I got into school and started learning about Abraham Lincoln, so I always thought it was just his shadow I was seeing. Then I had a dream when I was in 5th grade, and I finally saw his face, but it was like melting, like how a candlestick would dry or melted or whatever. And even after that, when I saw him in my room, I never saw his face, only in that dream. So in 7th grade, I went to a carnival with my cousins, and they didn't want to go in the circus, but I did. So I went by myself, and I swear, the guy who came out with the elephants looked like the exact same guy. If the face was like all unmelted, and I was so scared. Anyways, that was years ago, and I still see him sometimes. I don't think it's sleep paralysis because I can still move, so it's just unexplainable. That is strange. The next story comes from Juliet, and they write, 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember well, I was with my sister and my mother having breakfast, watching TV quietly when suddenly we saw a shadow person about 180 centimeters tall, walking down the hallway to the exit door. We felt a breath of air. At the moment of witnessing it, my pets ran out to bark at him. We all really felt it. We did not hear the sound of the door closing, so no one from the house had left. My mother was really surprised as I was in that moment. I can mention that it didn't really scare me when I witnessed it, but I was really wow and shocked. I didn't know if I had seen what was real or not, but we could see that it was a man. Almost no one believes us when we mention it, plus my mother, who was the one who we most impressed. I will never forget that memory. It was really impressive and so scary. In my country, there is a custom of putting incense. It is like a flavoring, but then my ancestors used to call them the aura. And my mother turned on one since she was so scared and wanted to be able to relax the house. We really didn't know if this person was a good or bad energy. The next story comes from Sabrina, and they write, I was staying at my grandma's, and one afternoon she went shopping for groceries. She left me in the house alone with her dog. I was watching YouTube on the living room, and suddenly I hear my grandma's voice, like whispering in my ear, clearly distressed, saying that I had to close the front door. I panicked and I got up and went to the kitchen, and then her dog started barking at where I was sitting when I heard her voice. I started calling my grandma, and suddenly I hear an awful crashing sounds. Turned out a car crashed into the house's garage and front door. What the fuck? That's crazy. This next story comes from Ghost Poison. They write, when me and my friend were about 10 or 11, my friend had a spot in this woods by their house that we used to go to that they built. It wasn't anything spectacular, just a very janky bench and some tires made almost to look like a structure, but that doesn't matter much. Anyway, we were sitting out there one day when we decided to venture a little further into the woods than usual. You jobbers. This spot he had wasn't very far from his house. In fact, you could see the house through the trees, but we went far enough that no one could see us. No one could have seen us. I don't know what led us to this point, but we were talking into the woods instead of to each other, when suddenly there was a voice that talked back. Oh shit. The voice was definitely one of a child's, sounding younger than us. It sounded close to us as well. Oh man, that's scary. Like, couldn't have been more than a few feet away, almost talking houses around theirs, and there wasn't any reason for anyone to have being in there. We didn't talk about it after that, and I've since stopped talking to them. But this is the only paranormal experience I've had to date, and that I couldn't find any sort of explanation for. The next story comes from Anna, and they write, I'm Brazilian. My grandma told me that when I was little, I was playing near the window in her living room, and she was talking to a friend of hers on the couch. She said that I look out the window, and went to her and said, look, Grandma, that man gave me sweets. She was paralyzed because that day there was no one in the street. It was cold and there was no way anyone could give me sweets through the window from the living room. Anyway, I ate them. Next story is from Julia Herbs. My friend said that he grew up in a haunted house, so I told him to tell me a story from when he lived there. His room was in an attic, and in his room there was a crawl space. Once he turned around 12ish or 13, he started to notice that the door to the crawl space would open slightly every maybe every night, I'm assuming, I don't know. He just thought it was air pushing the door open, so he didn't think much of it. But one night, the door creaked wide open, and he woke up and saw two hands coming out of the attic space and gripping onto the wall. There's no way. He said ever since then, he has pushed a dresser in front of the crawl space and slept most nights in the living room and hasn't heard anything since. Bruh. But he recently has come home from college and slept in his room, not thinking about it. He woke up to the attic crawl space door banging on the back of the dresser. There's no way. The next story comes from X. We're starting off with that I see shadow figures. I see them in a lot of places. This was yesterday. First off, I was just at work. I look at the break room as the door is open and something is staring at me, a black figure. It's almost as tall as the door. Naturally, I got frightened and looked down at my desk. I don't see them often at work. More startling was that my lunch break was soon. I had to go in there. I eventually manned up and went into the room. Nothing. I retrieved my lunch, but it stood at my desk now. Instead, I decided to eat in the break room. I never do. I had this overwhelming sense of dread follow me that day. My shoulders were feeling as if they carried a 10-ton of bricks. I for once felt a bit scared. My break eventually finished and I had to return. It wasn't there, so I felt at ease. We're skipping to when it's after work. It was dark outside. I leave my workplace and I go towards my car. It's right fucking there. I have to get home to feed my dogs, so I went forward. The closer I came, the wider its eyes grew. I remember blinking once and it was gone. I got into my car, the dread becoming greater. I decided to take detours on my way home. Today I found out there had been a car accident on my usual route. I think that little shit had something to do with it. I can't be certain. That's wild. The next story comes from Brains Eater. In my childhood home, I used to wake up at night because I was a night owl as a kid. I also liked sleeping with my parents, so when I wake up in the middle of the night, I would go downstairs to their bedroom. To the left of the stairs was the front door a few feet away, and there were some nights I would see a ghost of an old lady who always waved at me. As a kid, I was scared out of my mind and would run away. After a few years, I got less scared of seeing her, and one day I waved back and I never saw her again. A few years later, when we were about to move away, I told my mom about her, an old woman in a long dress who was a little hunched over, carrying a basket, a cloth wrapped around her head, and a machete hanging on her hip. My mom said that was exactly what my grandma looked like. Oh, that's awesome. The first time I ever saw a picture of what she actually looked like was a few years later in middle school. Oh, that's dope. Grandma just wanted to say hi. The next story comes from Stefan. When I was about 16 or 17, my mom was home alone and she heard a little girl say hello at the front door of the house and nobody was there, and she does not believe in the paranormal. Another time, my brother was home alone in the bathroom and heard footsteps and someone walking around the house moving things, so he texted 911, and lo and behold, nobody was there. Creepy shit. Some two quick stories. The next story comes from Whimsical Whispers. My mom is sensitive to spirits. She's shared many experiences with me. freaking out. The light was basically a light bulb attached onto a long string. You pull it, the lights turn on. Yep. So my mom reaches upward in an attempt to pull the string, and she said she felt a hand from above her touch her wrist. My mom screamed, and when they managed to fix the light, she was as pale as a ghost out of fear to this day. She swears it was something paranormal. Damn fucking right. Playing with the Ouija board, what do you expect? The next story comes from Shantao. I was 5 years old. I was visiting my grandparents in Japan. They live in the rural mountains of Hokkaido. I don't know how to say that, I'm sorry. Next to a big forest. I remember running around in that forest and meeting an old man who scolded me for being out in the woods by myself before bringing me back home. W guy. It was strange, as there were no houses around other than my grandparents, and my grandfather was home making dinner. Another time was when I was in my home with my parents in mainland Europe, and I heard wailing from the attic. Mind you, the attic had been closed off for years. Every night there was wailing, before it just stopped and never occurred again. Freaking those attic stories make me feel very uneasy. The next story comes from Kate Gray, and they say, I was young, probably 7 or 9. I woke up before anyone else, and my dad was at work. My mom was asleep on the couch because of her back issues. I was at the computer desk playing Minecraft while I ate cereal. You can see my sister's bedroom from the desk. I saw a whitish ghost-like figure float into her room without opening her door. She was wearing a white robe. We didn't have white robes. Weird. Another one was when we had a picture of a quote from the Bible, since we are religious. It had been secured there for many years to come, and no way but a person could take it down. It was an awful month for me, and my mental state was at its worst. It was an oddly quiet, eerie night. My mom and I were awake, and only us. My mom in the kitchen, me in the bathroom preparing to bathe my dog for fall. The picture fell out of nowhere. No sound but it crashing. The glass was smashed into bits and the frame cracked. We had, at the time, soft carpet. Strange. The next story comes from Unknown 1278. My roommate and I used to live together in an old family home. The home itself wasn't creepy. We usually had decorations of the seasons inside the house, so the house was actually cozy in person. We even got compliments from visitors from the homey vibe. Well, for some reason, for about a few months, we started having supernatural experiences during the night and the day. I would hear footsteps outside my door, thinking it was my roommate. I would always peek my head out every time at my bedroom door to see nothing after the sounds of heavy steps, which would become a reoccurring event. One day, my roommate was alone in her room with her door open. From that angle, she could see my bedroom from the hallway a few doors down. During this time, I was in the laundry room. When I got back from doing laundry, I noticed my roommate was freaking out. When I asked what happened, she explains that she saw me leave my room and walk across the hall, even though in reality, I was nowhere near that area at that time. She said I was wearing a different shirt. That's weird. We would then go on to have encounters similar to this for a while. One day, in the middle of the daytime, I heard my roommate clearly and loudly calling for me outside my room exactly 2 times loud. So I went to check if she was there, just to find an empty house. My roommate wasn't even home that day. No. These types of encounters of an almost tricky entity would go on until it eventually stopped with no real explanation as why it began or ended. We never felt the presence of it again, but we always remembered the chill of being met with no one after the sounds of hearing someone living inside our house. For a minute, we thought maybe a homeless person was sneaking into our house, that being the only logical explanation, but we would investigate each time and never find a thing. To this day, we don't know if those months where we coexisted with an intruder of a human or an entity. Your next story comes from Lame Bunny. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a lot of woods. It's not scary as it sounds, though. We had lots of animals and the vibes were giving wholesome farmhouse. I spent the majority of my time helping my parents on the farm. With my siblings, and had a very mundane childhood. It was sinister feelings while in there. When we were around 13, we stumbled across this sort of shack quite deep in the woods. You guys are about to get fucked. Well, let's see what happens. It became our hangout spot. We lugged couches and all types of shit into that place to make it feel like home, lol. And of course, as we got older, it became our drinking slash party place. We never really questioned where it came from or who built it. We figured it was abandoned by a farmer. Holy shit, something's about to happen, let's go. None of the adults knew about it, and we even made code words for when we would be heading out there. I have so many great memories from this little shack over the years. It's even where I had my first kiss. Oh shit. Now the spooky part happened when I was 17. It was just a normal average day. We were on the cusp of graduation and had stopped going to the shack less often. The younger generation had started to take over the spot. A group of us, maybe around 6 or 7, decided to go back to the shack and do some reminiscing. I packed a cooler full of beer and snacks and made my way over. We started drinking and chatting, and we were all having a great time. When it started to get a bit darker, one of my friends suggested a game of go home, stay home, with the shack being home. We were all a bit tipsy at this point, and it sounded fun. So we decided who was it, and the rest of us took off running to hide. I decided to hide with my boyfriend. We hid behind this massive tree that faced perfectly towards the shack, and we would be able to see my friend leave to go seek. We waited until he finished counting, and then he peeked around the tree to see him. And then we peeked around the tree to see him. We watched as he stood in the doorway looking around. He then took off in the opposite direction of us, and that's when we booked it to the shack. When we were about halfway to the shack, when we heard this piercing scream from our left, we dropped to the ground and stayed silent. Our first thought was that someone had been caught, but the scream gave me chills and freaked me out. We started to hear someone walking towards our direction. It was like slow, calculated steps, like they were trying to not make noise. Obviously, I was thinking it was one of my friends trying to make it home. Me and my boyfriend continued to hide in the shrubs, flat on the ground, waiting to see who was walking by us. We heard some shouts and running on the other side of us, and someone say, "Gotcha," so we knew the secret was on the other side of the shack. We heard the steps getting closer. I don't know why, but I felt extremely uneasy in the pit of my stomach with every step I heard. I don't think I could have moved if I wanted to. I was literally frozen in fear. I felt my boyfriend grip my arm and lean close to my face, and he whispered extremely quietly, "Don't move." I honestly felt like I was going to shit my pants when I heard all that. All of a sudden, the footsteps bolted away from the shack and into the woods. My boyfriend stood up and pulled me up. He gripped my hand and sprinted to the shack. When we got there, everyone was inside and they started asking where we had been. My boyfriend just said we were leaving. We hurriedly packed everything up and went home. It wasn't until we were all inside my friend's house back in town when my boyfriend said what he saw. When we were laying down in the bush, my boyfriend said he looked over to where the footsteps were coming from, and he saw a tall, large man hunched over slowly walking towards the shack. He said he doesn't know what made him turn around and run away, but he didn't want us to stay and find out. I've honestly never felt more frightened in my life, and so thankful for my boyfriend. I've never once been back to that shack since that day, and I'm now a lot more terrified of the woods. Before we all took off to university, we tried stopping the younger kids from going there, and even gave up the spot to the adults. I do know some teenagers still go out there. I have no idea if that man had malicious intent, but just thinking about sending shivers down my spine. I think that man was just trying to go home to his fucking shack, and all you assholes were messing around with it. I'm just kidding. That is scary. The next story comes from Cherub, and they write, "I saw a video on the internet entitled, 'If you do these things, you need to wake up immediately.' One of the activities was eating. I didn't buy it at first, but on Tuesday night, I dreamed about going to the cinema and eating a lot of candy, and I didn't wake up. The next week, I had a virus in my stomach that lasted the whole week." The next story is from Olivia. "This is something very strange that happened to me at home last year. My stepfather and I returned home since my mother was about to come. We decided to hide to scare her. I went under the bed, was there for about 10 minutes and I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anyone entering the house or the sound from my stepfather. Suddenly, I looked up and saw how the bed in the area of my head sank very slowly, in the shape of a cat paws or something similar. I don't have pets. I came out of the hiding place quite scared and crying, and my stepfather saw me. I told him where I had been hiding, and he didn't know what I was talking about. I've never hid under a bed again. The next story comes from Mackenzie, and they write, when I was 8, my family and I were getting back from somewhere quite late, so it was dark out. My dad and brother rushed inside to see who could get to the door first like a game, and my mom had to pee, so she also rushed into the house. I was the only one left out in the car, and I had a lot of stuff, so I'm trying to pick everything up, and I do and leave the car. I walk 3 steps, and I look up and see a shadow man of like 10 feet tall in front of me. It was close enough to where I should have seen his face or something because of the light, but I didn't. I tried talking to it. I said hello multiple times, and it even asked what his name was. I didn't get a response, and I stared at him for a minute or 2. Then I ran to the stairs. I opened my front door. I looked back to where he was, and he was gone. Everyone in my family thought I was crazy, but maybe they are right because I never saw him again. Last story comes from Jan1EK. My house is quite old, and my dad is quite in touch with seeing ghosts and stuff, but my dad never sees anything in our house. I usually don't see them either, but I definitely feel stuff watching. Not all the time, and it differs per time. But there's 2 experiences that I'll never forget. One time, I went downstairs in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. or so, to go pee, because we only have one toilet downstairs. I got out of the toilet after doing my business, and was going to the living room to head upstairs, and I could swear I saw something under the sofa. I got full body chills too. It was like huge, fully black, extremely long limbs, with huge fingers and fingernails, more like a claw actually, and I can remember this super long tongue slithering from the glistening white sharp teeth, but something you would see in the movies, but I swear to God it was real, and I got so scared. And I ran upstairs really quick, and I heard these claws really quick on the ground following me upstairs. I was like, oh fuck, until I was in my room. Really scary. I remember when I went downstairs, I already found it odd that my cat wasn't in the living room. He's an outdoor cat, but always seemed to be present when I would go down for a quick toilet break, but yeah, that's one of them. I've had times that I've literally been poked before by nothing and scream in reflex. Really odd experience to have. I never scream when someone scares me. I also had a time that I believe there was some trick spirits or something that stole a lot of my stuff. Like random stuff would go missing. I had asked a psychic what I should do because I was sick of stuff like my keys or jewelry suddenly missing, and she said that I should threaten them to give them my stuff back and put a foot down. Literally maybe a day or a few hours later when I did, stuff randomly started to pop up. That's crazy. Thank you everybody for sending in stories. I do not believe in ghosts until I see one. I'm not gonna. But I had a lot of fun making this video. Feel free to comment your stories in the comment section of this video. If I probably will make another one eventually. Oh my goodness, thank you for watching. I'm tired. And I hope you have a great rest of your night. I love you. And I'll see you next time.